what the EU's emergency energy plan means for business. The European Commission published a major energy action plan on April 22nd, timed to Earth Day, but driven by something far more urgent. Since the beginning of the conflict in the Middle East in March 2026 and the subsequent closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the EU has spent an additional $28.24 billion on fossil fuel imports in the first 52 days alone. The plan, titled AccelerateEU Energy Union, lays out a five-part response covering coordination, consumer and industry protection, clean energy acceleration, grid upgrades, and investment mobilization. For companies with European operations, supply chains, or procurement relationships, the plan is worth reading beyond the headlines. What it signals about the near-term operating environment in Europe has concrete implications. The immediate pressure points. The Commission is explicit about where the stress is concentrated. Jet fuel is a particular concern. Approximately 40% of EU jet fuel consumption is imported, and about half of all imports pass through the Strait of Hormuz. The Commission is moving to map refinery capacity, coordinate stock releases, and create a fuel observatory tracking supply across the EU. For companies with significant air freight dependencies or European logistics operations, the summer aviation season is the near-term risk window. Diesel and bunker fuel costs are already driving up freight rates and putting road transport operators and short-sea shipping under pressure. The Commission has triggered crisis support mechanisms for the fisheries and aquaculture sector and is preparing a state aid temporary framework for sectors most exposed to price spikes. For procurement teams managing European supplier relationships, that cost pressure is already flowing through contracts. Natural gas exposure is the other pressure point. About 2/3 of the natural gas consumed in the EU goes into buildings and industry. The Commission notes that many households and businesses are currently still protected by contracts concluded before the conflict, but those protections will expire. When they do, the price impact will move through energy bills and eventually into food and production costs across industrial value chains. What the acceleration agenda means for operations beyond immediate relief, the plan sets an aggressive timeline for structural change. The Commission is calling for renewable capacity deployment to reach 100 gigawatts per year, permitting procedures to be cut to a maximum of 2 years across Europe by end of 2026, and each member state to establish at least one renewable acceleration area. A legislative proposal on network charges is expected in May, aimed at reducing electricity costs for energy-intensive industries. The storage target is also significant. The EU currently has 55 gigawatts of storage capacity and is targeting 200 gigawatts by 2030, with batteries playing a central role. For facilities teams evaluating European sites, those targets inform the investment environment around on-site energy and grid reliability planning. The Commission is also pushing heat pump deployment from around 2.4 million units annually to 4 million units by 2030, doubling installed capacity to reduce fossil fuel consumption in buildings by an estimated 200 terawatt-hours. Companies with large European building footprints running gas-based heating systems should be reading these targets as a signal about where incentive structures and regulatory pressure are heading. The broader signal, the Commission frames this explicitly. The choices made now determine whether Europe faces the next energy crisis from a position of vulnerability or strength. For business leaders, that framing has a direct operational translation. Companies that have been slow to diversify European energy procurement, upgrade facility efficiency, or map their exposure to gas price volatility in their European supply chains are carrying risk that is no longer theoretical. The plan is one of the most comprehensive emergency energy documents the Commission has published since REPowerEU in 2022. The details are worth tracking closely over the coming weeks as specific legislative proposals and investment frameworks come into force. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.